to call to order the regular Planning Commission meeting for August 5th, 2020. We won't do the Pledge of Allegiance since we're out. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Blanco.
Here.
Commissioner Dickerson.
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Here.
Commissioner Seifert.
Here.
Chair Lopez.
Here. We have some additional information for this Zoom platform meeting. This is a regular Planning Commission public hearing. Comments should have been submitted to the city planning staff via email by 3 p.m. this afternoon. If you wish to comment on an agenda item, please use the raise hand icon on the Zoom platform. Once you are recognized, you will be unmuted and allowed to comment on the business at hand in the order received. Maximum comment time is 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. If you are calling in and wish to be acknowledged, please raise your hand by dialing *9 and identify yourself when unmuted. For commissioners, as always, if we can hold off on the questions until the presentation is completed, and then we'll go ahead and use the raise hand feature for to be recognized. This online meeting will require a roll call vote for any decision of any item. So with that said, we'll move on to the approval of Planning Commission minutes of July 15th, 2020. Has the commission had a chance to review those minutes, and if so, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the July 15 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Do we have a second? It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez. It's been seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson.
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco.
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert.
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye. The next item is the public comment period. Each member of the audience may address the commission on any subject within the commission's business. Each member of the audience in each subject is limited to a discussion of 3 minutes or is otherwise directed by the chair. Do we have anyone wishing to make a public comment on an item that's not on the agenda? I'm looking at our attendees. I don't see anyone with their hand up, nor the panelists, so we will go ahead and move on to the first item of our public hearing. Before we do that, I want to give the order of the meeting, or at least of the item. I'll go ahead and introduce the agenda item and turn it over to staff for a presentation. Once staff's presentation is completed, I will open up the agenda item to the commissioners to ask any questions of staff. After all the questions by the commissioners are answered, I will open the agenda item to the applicant who will be on as an attendee. I will then ask if any commissioners have any questions for the applicant. Once the commission has asked questions of the applicant, I will then open the item to those in favor, against, or neutral toward the agenda item. For the public, please wait to raise your hand until after I've called for a public comment on the item, and the host will unmute you in the order received. Please remember, if you are dialing in, please use *9 to raise your hand, and you will have up to 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. When the public comment is completed, only the applicant will be able to make the rebuttal. After the rebuttal and no further questions from the commission, I will close the public hearing and turn the agenda item back to the commission for any questions, discussion, and finally a decision. With that said, let's go ahead and go to our first item. First item is La Favorita Plaza Conditional Use Permit Amendment at 1637 South Broadway. May we please have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One moment while I set this up. I will share it with Zoom in just one moment. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Carol Ziesenhenny, and I will be presenting the project. Sorry? Can everyone hear me? Okay. I apologize. Yes. Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission, members of the public. Mr. Chair, thank you. I am Carol Zuzenhenny, and I'm presenting the project for La Favorita Plaza Conditional Use Permit Amendment at 1637 South Broadway. And this is a conditional use, this is a revisiting of the conditional use permit that was approved in November of 2018 for a multi-tenant discount mall. This permit amendment is before you tonight to allow new land uses in addition to the approved uses. So without further ado, this is the project site. It is located on South Broadway and New Love. La Favorita Market is just to the south. Crumbles Cafe is to the east. Residential neighborhood is off to the west on Lincoln Street, and the remainder of the Old Town Shops shopping center is to the north. And Battles Road is further to the north along there. So this property is located in the Planned Development General Commercial District. It is surrounded on 3 sides by the same district, and off to the west is a high-density residential neighborhood. So this is a view of the building frontage. It's a 15,000 square foot commercial building. In the front you can see existing landscaping and the existing project. This is a view of the site plan. The applicant is proposing landscape improvements. An addition of up to 10 trees are proposed on the site, as well as along Lincoln Street, excuse me. So it's there are approximately 3 trees proposed to be planted along the street frontage on Lincoln. So this is a view of the approved floor plan. The project was originally proposed as a general merchandise and retail sales. The project was originally proposed as a 16-tenant discount mall. So in yellow, there's visible the different potential vendors. A few were to be determined. Most of the vendors at the time of the original approval were intended to be owned by the building owner, Mr. and Mr. Merched, father and son. The original floor plan just featured 8-foot wide walk aisles and 8 to 10 feet tall tenant separations, essentially. And so without further ado, I'll move forward to the proposed changes for the project. So the applicant is proposing new uses in addition to the general merchandise sales. They're proposing hand-scooped ice cream, a barber shop, and filtered water dispensing. The original conditions of approval for the CUP, which was project number U 2018-0012, required an amendment to the CUP or a brand new use permit. The added uses will not result in the need for any additional parking, and all the standard conditions that were applied for the original approval are still in effect. The only changes proposed are essentially adding the new uses to the approved project. So this is a view of the approved floor plan. The applicant is proposing a little bit more of a revision. There in the purple are the 2 independent vendors, and in the teal, the light teal, is the owner's own businesses. So the owner is intending to, the 3 uses that are proposed are off to the back. The ice cream shop is in the far back, right in front of the manager's office. The barber shop is on the top left-hand corner, and that is independently owned. And as you can see, there are walls that are separating this use from the rest of the uses. And Western Wear is also independently owned. The remainder of the store pretty much operates like a general merchandise store. There's anything from cookware to clothing to children's clothing to shoes. And then in the front of the building, in the front near the entrance, is the proposed water dispensing center. And so staff is comfortable with the proposed changes. The original language of the permit was intended to just ensure that if any additional uses were proposed, that it was reviewed by staff, city staff, and went through the proper permitting channels for health permits and other things like that. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission by motion approve permit amendment A 2020-0008. Staff is available for comment and the applicant is here as well. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Carol. Does the commission have any questions of staff? I have one question, Carol. Is the vending through the wall? Can you get the water being outside of the building, or do you have to be inside of the building in order to
From my understanding, it was within the walls of the building, so it's right in the front entrance.
Okay, all right, thank you. I see Commissioner Dickerson, you have your hand up, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. Two of the new uses, the barbershop and the ice cream scoop, I think they're restricted at this time because of COVID. Is that correct? All right, so with that in mind, if we authorize this, then what, they're going to build the spaces out and then basically set them idle until those uses can be implemented? Is that what they're going to do?
I'll defer that to the applicant. We received this application before the pandemic, so it's unfortunate that it's coming to fruition now. But the applicant can probably speak to this better than I.
Okay.
Okay, I see no other questions from staff. May we hear from the applicant? I think Mr. Albrecht and Ms. Carlin are on for Revette Architects. Mr. Albrecht, please go ahead.
So Mr. Merched is one of the owners, and I believe he's allowed to talk now. Mr. Merched, you just need to unmute yourself. Oh, there you are.
Hello guys, good afternoon or good evening.
Hello.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes.
I listened to you guys from the beginning and to see what we're gonna do, because we've been moving for the last 2 years. We have a lot of problem with the city. We have a lot of bill. We spend a lot of money. So right now we need to open. We got the plan. We got the plan we already have in the city. So hopefully we can get the result, because we get a lot of beat up on the city. We've been a lot of money. We've been losing, especially with coronavirus. They're expecting it. So right now look like I'm gonna run out of business. So hopefully you guys can help us this to go through to this one. Otherwise, it's gonna affect my workers. It's gonna affect me, my family, the whole shit.
Yes, no, we definitely understand. Mr. Brissett, Commissioner Dickerson had a question. I thought maybe one of the applicants, designers, was going to answer the question, but Commissioner Dickerson, can you repeat your question?
Okay.
Certainly, sir. The question I had was that two of the new that you were bringing forth are ice cream and scoops and barbershop, both of which are restricted this time because of the virus and the epidemic. So the question I had for you is, if we approve this, you're going to build the space out for them and then leave them idle until such time as they're allowable uses? Is that the idea?
Yeah. Wait, who's going to speak? Hassan? Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
One second.
So I believe Mr. Merched's son, Hassan, is on the line, and he had his hand raised. If he would like to unmute himself, he might be able to answer that question.
Mute yourself.
So you're allowed to talk, Hassan, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay, do you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was trying to figure out how to hang of it. So good afternoon, my name is Hassan Merched, and I am the son of the owner and also the supervisor of the store. So regarding the question that you asked, yes, we will be operating at the moment with the coronavirus, everything's shut down. So if we do get the approval, we would like to move forward of getting everything permitted and done. And once that's all done, then we'll just put it aside until further notice. When everything's back to normal, we can start operation. But regardless of the COVID-19 right now, it's going to be 100% remaining closed.
Okay.
But we would just like to move forward with all the permits and all that stuff to get it done.
Okay, thank you, Hassan.
Thank you, guys.
Does any of the commission have any other questions for the applicant or staff? Hassan, I see you raised your hand again. Do you have something else to add?
I'm sorry, I think by accident.
Okay.
Put it down.
Does the commission have any other questions for either staff or the applicant? Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the project? Against or neutral to the project? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission and open it up for discussion, deliberation, or a motion.
Chair, this is Tim Seifert.
Commissioner Seifert, go ahead.
Yeah, this is exactly what we approved. I mean, they said they were going to bring in other people and other members of the community that were getting put out on the other side of town from their businesses. I have no issue with this. I would make a motion to approve permit amendment A2020-0008.
Do we have a second?
I would second that motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Seifert, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Seifert?
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco?
Aye.
Chair Lopez?
Aye. Motion passes. Congratulations. Good luck on your venture. Okay, we'll move on to the second item of our agenda. It is the BLOSSER Southeast Specific Plan, General Plan and Zoning Map Amendment, and tentative track map at the northeast corner of South BLOSSER Road and West Battles Road. May we please have a staff report?
Chair, if we can just have a moment while we switch planners at the computer here,
Okay,
and
yeah, no worries.
we'll be right there. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair Lopez and Commissioners. Good evening, my name is Dana Eady, and I'm going to be giving the staff presentation tonight for the BLOSSER Southeast Area 5B Specific Plan Amendment, General Plan Amendment, and Rezone Project. Okay, that's okay. So this is an aerial view of the project site. The site's located at the northeast corner of Battles Road and BLOSSER Road. It's approximately 145 acres in size, and it's currently utilized for agricultural cultivation. The surrounding development to the site includes single-family residences to the north, south, and west, as well as Manami Park to the east, and industrial development to the northwest. The Santa Maria Fairgrounds is to the northeast, and the high school's in that area as well. And then to the northwest, there's some industrial zoned area where Lineage Logistics is located and some other industrial uses. So these are some photos of the project site as viewed from surrounding roadways. The photos at the top of the slide are from Depot Street, adjacent to the railroad, and that's looking west. And then the bottom photo is from BLOSSER Road, looking southeast across the site. The site has been continually used for agricultural cultivation for many years, and that's currently what is on the site at this point. So this slide shows the existing zoning and land use designations on the site. There are two areas that are located in the northwest and the southwest corner that are zoned community commercial. And then in the center of the site, we have some residential zoning. So there's medium density residential zoning, which is R2. And then there's also some lower density residential development, which is zoned RSL1, and some high density. The site also currently has a community facility zone on it that's approximately 24 acres, and that would include the development of a new school in that area. And then in the northeast corner of the property, it's zoned recreational open space for a new park. So that's the existing zoning at this point. The project site is identified as Area 5B within the Area 5 BLOSSER Southeast Specific Plan. There's 3 areas here that are shown. There's areas 5A, 5B, and 5C. Currently, areas 5A and 5C are developed. There's a total of approximately 714 residential units that have been constructed in areas 5A and 5C. Area 5B is undeveloped, and with the zoning it currently has, it could be developed with approximately 976 single-family residential units. So the applicant is requesting to rezone Area 5B and also do a corresponding general plan amendment to the site. And this slide is showing the proposed zoning and land use designations. The community commercial zoned portion of the property would be located in the northwest corner of the site. And that location does provide a buffer between the existing industrial uses across BLOSSER to the west and the residential uses that are located to the east. High-density residential zones are located on the northern portion of the property adjacent to Stoll Road and in the southwest corner of the property. And then approximately 59 acres of R1 zoning would be located, it's shown in yellow here, kind of in the center of the site. And then you can see the plan, public facilities zone for a new school is around the same acreage. It's about 23 acres. And it's just adjacent to the recreational open space zoning. So the school and the recreational open space are adjacent to each other, and the Manami Park is on the other side there. So this table provides a comparison between the existing zoning and acreages and the proposed zoning. So with the amended project, the single-family small lot and medium density residential zoning would be replaced, as I mentioned, with 59 acres of single-family residential zoned area. The high-density residential zone would be increased from 8 acres up to 28 acres. And then the other zones would remain similar sized. So overall, with the amended project, it would increase the total number of residential units on the site from 976 to 1,105. So it's an increase of 129 units. This is a conceptual lot layout that's been included in the specific plan for future residential development within the R1 zoned area of the site. It includes the locations for new local roadways within the subdivision, and the final design and lot layout and roadways will be determined when future tract maps and plan development permits are submitted to subdivide and develop the R1 zone portion of property. So at this point, no development is proposed with the project. It's just amending the zoning and land use designations and doing a specific plan to set this up for future development. So the project was reviewed at 3 study sessions. They were held in July and September of last year, and then most recently in May of this year. The discussion topics involved looking at doing non-traditional street sections that would have maybe a safer, narrower roadway design to slow traffic and include some on-street parking and pedestrian connections. In addition, amenities were recommended to be included, and so the specific plan does include a park with sports fields, some open space area, and bike and pedestrian paths. It was also discussed to include the opportunity to have double frontage lots so that there could be some homes fronting the street, and also undergrounding utilities. So that includes looking at undergrounding the Battles Channel drainage area, as well as utilities in the area. So a specific plan has been prepared for Area 5B, and it provides the framework for future development of the site. The specific plan includes some figures for development of public facilities, so for transportation and circulation, sewer, water, and drainage. It also includes standards and criteria for development for residential and commercial zones, and those address architecture, landscaping, and lighting, and some other areas as well. Like I mentioned, it does include amenities such as the public park with soccer fields and playgrounds, some pedestrian pathways and bikeways, and landscape parkways. So the proposed circulation plan is shown here, and it includes the extension of Western Avenue and La Brea Avenue through the site with a traffic circle in the center of the site. New traffic signals would be installed at the intersections that are shown on this slide. That would be at Battles and Western, Blosser and La Brea, and also out on Stoll Road at Stoll and Western, and then there at the corner there. Pedestrian connections would be provided at each of the intersections, and as well as at La Brea, which is going to be adjacent to the new school site. And a pedestrian connection is also shown here crossing the Santa Maria Valley Railroad. And the final design of this crossing would be determined in the future and would be completed as a city project that would be utilizing AB 1600 fees. And then along the extensions of Western and La Brea, there's also going to be pedestrian and bike pathways that are shown here with the dashed line. Yeah, sorry. Just having a little technical thing, excuse me. Okay, so the photo at the top of this slide is showing the existing roadway design at Western and La Brea. And the specific plan includes an example for a non-standard street section. Western and La Brea are designed or intended to be collector roads. And so the street section that we're showing here does narrow the road by approximately 4 feet from what the city's standard is. It includes 12-foot roadways with 8-foot parking on each side. And then there's an 8-foot planted buffer on each side of the roadway. And then on the other side of that, we have 10 feet that would be for a combination of a paved bikeway and a sidewalk. And then there's some room adjacent to that for a planted buffer. The sewer and water infrastructure is shown here. The proposed new water and sewer mains would connect up to the city's existing infrastructure. And these figures are included in the specific plan and call out where those connections are. This is a photo showing the stormwater facilities for the site. The project includes a couple of different drainage facilities. So there's a 3.5 acre retention basin that water would be directed to. And then in addition, the Battles Channel is located just south of this site, adjacent to Battles Road, and a photo of that is shown here. And The existing Battles Channel is proposed to be undergrounded as a part of future development of the site. The drainage facilities are required to be constructed to meet city as well as Santa Barbara County flood control standards. And so the city and the applicant are currently in the process of providing Santa Barbara County flood control with additional information regarding the sizing of the retention basin and some details for the Battles Channel. And these details need to be included on the tentative tract map for the project. And so staff is going to be recommending that the tentative tract map be continued to a future planning commission date so that these additional details can be completed and worked out with flood control. So the specific plan includes some examples of architectural designs for homes and for future commercial development. And so these slides are taken directly from the plan. So we have the low, medium density residential examples here, some high density residential examples, and then the convenience commercial examples. These examples are taken from other local projects in the Santa Maria area, and they would provide examples to guide future developers in how to design homes and other development in the specific plan area. This slide includes the landscaping and street trees for the project. The landscaping would include some planted buffers, as I mentioned, with trees, and also some low water usage and drought-tolerant plants. And then the street tree examples are trees that are listed on the city's approved street tree list. So there's a mixture there of small, medium, and large trees. Some additional amenities that I mentioned are shown here to be incorporated into the new park. There's some picnic tables and barbecue areas shown here, some examples of seating areas and playgrounds and walking paths. And then this slide is the conceptual park design. And I know some of these notes are a little difficult to read, so I'll just kind of go through what they are. So there's 4 different soccer fields that are here that are called out. And then there are also some basketball courts in this area, a couple of different playgrounds for different ages of children would be here. And then there's a large parking lot that would be along the western side of the property. And at this point, the city's Rec and Parks Department is in the process of looking at obtaining grants to build this park. So that is in process at this time. So for environmental review, a supplemental environmental impact report was prepared for the project. The draft was completed in January of 2020, and it was circulated for public review and comments. The city received 8 comment letters on the document, and the comments that were received were reviewed and were addressed in the final document. None of the comments resulted in the need to make any changes to any of the environmental findings that were in the document or to the project description. And for project impacts, mitigation measures are included in the document and have been addressed in the specific plan for the issue areas that are shown on the slide. There are 2 impacts to air quality that were identified as significant and unavoidable impacts. And those are relating to mobile source emissions. So it would be primarily traffic. And then there was another one resulted from just overall cumulative impacts. But those significant and unavoidable impacts are the same impacts that were identified for the existing project. So there aren't any additional Class 1 impacts beyond what's already been approved for the site. And all the other impact areas were less than significant. We did prepare a statement of overriding considerations for approval, and that statement includes some information or findings about why the project's benefits would outweigh the impacts to air quality. So we received a letter from the applicant on August 3rd, and staff reviewed that letter, and we are recommending some additional changes to the specific plan and to the mitigation monitoring and reporting program to address some of those comments. And so I have those here on the slide. And so the changes to the specific plan would really, it's to specify that all on-site utilities would be installed underground. We'd like to add a note that the final design and location of new local roadways would be determined when residential lots are subdivided. There is a section that discusses pedestrian connectivity over the railroad, and we would like to amend that to clarify that that would be completed in the future as a city project utilizing AB 1600 fees, and then to provide some flexibility in the type of connection that would occur. We'd like to remove the specific bridge examples from the plan. And then for the MMRP, it's really just clarifying a few of the mitigation measures addressing visual resources and greenhouse gases, and then also it's clarifying a term to replace modern roundabout with traffic circle for consistency. So staff recommends that your commission take the following actions. By resolution, recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution to certify the supplemental environmental impact report and adopt a statement of overriding considerations as well as the mitigation monitoring program for the project. Also by resolution, recommend that the City Council approve the specific plan amendment to Area 5B only. By resolution, recommend that the City Council approve the general plan land use map amendment and zone change for Area 5B. And then, as I mentioned previously, we would recommend continuing the tentative tract map to a future hearing date, just so that the additional questions from Santa Barbara County Flood Control regarding that drainage channel can be fully addressed. So thank you. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Dana. Does the commission have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to the applicant. Lori, go ahead. Oh,
Hi, this is Lori Tamura. Can you hear me?
yes, Lori.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dana is going to help me with my presentation. Okay. Good evening. Again, Lori Tamura with Urban Planning Concepts.
Lori, sorry, I hate to interrupt you. Real quick, I just want to ask if any commissioners had any ex parte communications. I did have a message from Lori, and we exchanged an email regarding the project. I don't know if any other commissioners had any other ex parte communication.
Tim Seifert.
Commissioner Seibert.
I did have a meeting with Lori regarding this project. We walked the streets and discussed the project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Seibert.
Commissioner Blanco here. I also had email communication with Ms. Lori Tamura.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco.
No communication with Lori Tamura. This is Commissioner Hernandez.
Okay, thank you.
I had none.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dixon. Sorry about that, Lori. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm here representing the Equistapache family, the extended members, and with me tonight is Taiki. He's sitting here if you can see him. So we have been working with the city staff on and off for about 5 years on this project, a number of different planners, and we're here tonight with the culmination of that work. Dana, if you could go to the next slide, please. Similar to the exhibit that Dana provided, this is the planning areas on the east side of Blosser Road is the planning area 5, which she illustrated. On the west side is area 6. These planning areas were approved in 1993 to be annexed to the city of Santa Maria. And over the last 25 years, they've been slowly being built out. The critical roadway that needs to be addressed is Western. Western is the parallel collector road that runs from Betaravia through the Zimmerman development, through the southern portions of Area 5, and then all the way north up to Stoll. This collector road was designed to convey traffic parallel to Blosser Road and be a relief valve for that major roadway. So the idea of adding parking along Western is of concern for our project as well as, I would think, for the whole city. So yesterday, I did a tour of the area about 6:30 at night, and I'd like to walk you through that tour. If you could go to the next slide. As Dana illustrated, this is the standard city collector road. This is what has been designed throughout the city. The change that has occurred is that where you see the 10-foot notation on the other side of the 6 feet, those have been swapped so that there's landscaping on one side and the sidewalks are interior. Could you go to the next slide? So this is Western at Battles, and you can see the sidewalk with a pedestrian, mature trees, the green screen walls that provided a separation from the traffic on Western as it ultimately will be used. Next slide. Again, this is Western on one side with the mature trees. These are about 15-year-old trees and nice lush area. Across the street where you might see some open space there, that's where Ontiveros School has been constructed and the new park is going in. So the trees were not planted at that time, but they are now starting to come in. Next slide. Again, this is at the Pacific Crest section where the trees have come in nicely. There's traffic, there's some traffic, pedestrians, and this is a really comfortable experience. Next slide. Again, nice shaded, screened, green screen along the one side, trees on the other, nice separation. This is the standard city street design throughout most of the specific plan areas. Next slide. Someone walking a dog. I do have to extend some comments to the Parks Department. Very well maintained. It looks clean. The green screening on the walls have prevented graffiti and very clean, very nicely done. And this particular Sonia Road would be similar to what La Brea would look like if it was done in the traditional design. Then this is across the street from the school. Obviously, there's a lot more activity here when school's in session, but this is some of the younger trees that ultimately will be the same size as the ones you saw in the Pacific Crest neighborhood. This is in the Harvest Glen area. Go ahead. And so this is the specific plan cross-section that was presented earlier with the 2 lanes of traffic and then parking on both sides. Your green separation, which is where the trees would be planted. And then you have an additional 5 feet added to the sidewalk for a bike trail, and then some additional green for planting along the walls. So I want to give you the experience that this will have for the city on Western. Next slide. This is Biscayne, which runs north parallel to Western, which does allow parking on both sides. Same width of road, same landscaping, sidewalk, and we'll just go ahead and continue through there. This is the parking that currently exists at 6:30 at night on Biscayne for the spillover traffic from, or parking for the St. Clair and the Harvest Glen project, and quite a bit of traffic on this street. Go ahead. Again, this is fully parked, and go ahead. A lot of activity, and I didn't see anybody walking in the sidewalk in this one. Go ahead. This one's they're going over to the entrance to St. Clair. Go ahead. And there were two semis parked on this street also. Go ahead. And the reason I added this slide in here is this is northern Western past Stoll, and this would be, parking on the sidewalk, and then if you have front yards facing it. Over time, there's no guarantee what the front yards are going to look like. So you may have walls put up, chain link fences, people evolving their yards into what might not be as appealing as the green screened walls and tree-lined streets. Go ahead. So the point that I wanted to make with this illustration is we could go down the road of the non-traditional collector street that has proven, the collector streets have proven to be successful. People enjoy them. It's nice and safe. Or we can have parking along those sections. Either way is the city's choice. It just seems a little strange to be putting that much parking on something that's going to be conveying a lot of traffic. Biscayne is not a through road, but Western is going to be a through connector road running north-south from Stoll through Battles all the way down to Betaravia, and it will have a lot of traffic on it at some time. The rest of my presentation was in regards to the pedestrian crosswalk. The reason that I wanted to touch on that is because it's a good idea if it could be feasible, but right now we have major transmission lines running along the railroad tracks, two tiers of transmission lines, and the pedestrian track crosswalk would have to cross over the railroad tracks and also Depot Street. So the span would be about 150 to 170 feet long. And if you go ahead and flip through the rest of the slides quickly. Again, just to give you the illustration of all of the electrical lines that are along the railroad tracks, not on our property, and they would all, at some point, would have to be underground in order to do some kind of pedestrian crosswalk, or the pedestrian crosswalk would have to go over these lines. Go ahead. Another illustration of not only the utility lines, but the span that this pedestrian bridge would need to cover in order to get through the railroad tracks, as well as the width of Depot Street. Go ahead. This was an illustration of the one pedestrian bridge that's in Guadalupe, and that's not spanning the utility lines. It's running parallel to it, but you can see the switchbacks that need to be accomplished in order to meet the ADA requirements. So it's not just a bridge, it's the whole structure that needs to be looked at. Next one. And in this case, they actually put chain link over the top of it. This is an older bridge, it's about 65 years old, not probably designed to the same standards as you will see the next bridge. Go ahead. Go ahead. This is the Jennifer Street Bridge in San Luis Obispo, and it is a substantial structure. And this would be the newer design. So if you want to keep going. You can see what they had to do in order to get the ADA standard switchbacks for the bikes to go up that ramp, as well as the stairwells. So this is a substantial investment for the city, takes up a lot of real estate, would impact the soccer fields at Manetti Center, as well as the soccer fields on this new property. And it just is a very big endeavor, and in most cases, I think money would better be spent on the parks and the recreation amenities rather than a structure of this magnitude. We appreciate staff's direction as far as deferring this, and if they decide to include it in AB 1600 fees, it is something that would be a regional improvement and should not be tied to one particular project. So I would like to extend my appreciation to Dana and the rest of the staff for their work on this project. It's come a long way. The continuance on the track map, we appreciate the efforts that are going on with flood control and public works. There are also other conditions that need to be revised as we move towards approval of the map. So tonight I'd like to thank everyone involved in this project, and the rest of the document we've reviewed with the family, and we are ready to move forward with an approval. So thank you very much for your time on this item.
Thank you, Lori. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant? I see none at this time. I'll go ahead and open the project up to those in favor, against, or neutral towards the project. Please use, Mr. Glenn Morris, please go ahead. Mr. Morris, go ahead. I think you need to, is it muted on our end? Oh, there we go.
No, I think it was on my end. Good evening, commissioners, and Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to join you this evening.
Oh, we lost you. I'm sorry, Mr. Morris, you're going to have to unmute yourself again. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Very good. Are we back?
Yes, there we are.
Very good. So I wanted to give you some context around what we see as the importance of this project. As was mentioned in the staff report, this is the last significant piece of land within the current city limits that was set aside for housing. Even in the middle of the COVID situation, we continue to have very low housing inventory, and across all of the different housing types and price points. And just to give you kind of a context of where we think the importance of this in the future would be, this last week we learned that Vandenberg Air Force Base is formally being considered as a potential host site for the U.S. Space Force Command. Should we be fortunate enough to secure that designation, it would bring with it an additional 1,500 uniformed employees and their families, plus some yet to be determined number of contractors, vendors, government relation types, folks that would engage with the command staff of that operation. One of the areas that we're being asked to respond to as a community, as a potential host community, deals specifically with the living environment that these new transplants to our community would enjoy, and housing is a significant part of that equation. being able to reassure the Air Force that Santa Maria has planned for a wide range and a significant inventory of housing to be built over the coming years as that project might unfold would be a real feather in our cap and would go a long ways to helping us score well in that project. Again, I think without that designation, the need for housing still exists and will continue to exist as we try to grow our local economic base and employment in the community. But I thought that one might be just one special project that would give you a little context about the importance of this kind of development moving forward. And with that, again, I appreciate the work of the applicant and the family and the staff in getting us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris, and thank you for what you're doing for the Valley. Appreciate it. Is there any other person wishing to make a comment? Mr. Mike Grogan, Mr. Grogan, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. 3 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. There is a tremendous need for housing. I did want to point out that one of the reasons that parking is so tight on Biscayne is that when these high-density apartments are built, and the one on Biscayne is actually a condo project, there's never enough parking. You know, we see it at Harvest Glen, and we see it at Hancock Terrace Apartments, where because of the cost of units, you know, there's multiple cars and they spill out into the neighborhood. So I would hope that when projects are approved, that, you know, that parking is addressed. We do need housing, we do, and it is critical, and there's a lot of good things on the horizon. The cost of units are an issue for our families. The new Easton Apartments, the starting price for a studio apartment is $1,400, okay? So, you know, what's going to transpire here is, are we going to have affordable housing or just more market rate housing? Other than that, I think slowing the traffic down around the school and around the residents is good. I disagree. Western is a collector, but it is not a major collector like BLOSSER Road, which goes the whole length of the city, or Betteravia Road. It will not have that kind of traffic. We do need to get school buses in and out of there. It's a big site, which is exciting for us. It's good to have that, and we're appreciative that it was included in the original plan. It's still there. And in terms of the overpass or the walking bridge, boy, if that, you know, to me it sounds like the city's taking on that expense if it's feasible. Okay, so why get rid of that if it is feasible? Because right now, the whole BLOSSER Southwest Pacific plan is congested because you can't bring Carmen through because of the railroad, right? You got the Battles Crossing is all you got. We have a lot of kids that will be going to Amena School and to the new school that will be coming across Depot Street and over. It would be nice if they could walk. It would save us having to bus them short distances. So since that is something the city's taken on, I'd ask the commissioners to leave that in and leave the plan as proposed. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Grogan. Are there any questions? I see another attendee. Mr. Himoto, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Rob Himoto of the Santa Maria Valley Railroad. This project is going to have a major negative impact on the railroad. And I really urge you to keep that pedestrian bridge in. That would really help alleviate the pedestrian traffic across the railroad. We've had a change of management last year, and then earlier this year, unfortunately, one of our longtime board members have passed away. So we kind of have been changing direction. SlowCog and Caltrans encourage us to interweave commuter rail in our plans. So in the future here, we hope to partner with the city and run commuter rail to alleviate some of this traffic. I just see all this housing coming up here. Traffic's only going to get worse, and the railroad needs to be a part of the solution, and we can haul passengers certainly as well as freight. The other thing is our traffic has been growing. This year, with this COVID thing, our traffic has really increased. This is going to be our busiest year in 30 years. Because almost all of our customers are essential businesses. And so I'm sure you noticed our trains have gotten longer and more frequent. But I really urge you to keep that pedestrian bridge in the plans. I don't want to see this kicked down the road here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamato. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor, against, or neutral to the project? I see no other hands being raised. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to the applicant for any rebuttal. Mr. Moore?
Thank you very much. I don't have any response to the comments. I think it's a good idea to include the bridge as a city capital project and under the AB 1600 fees. And I do think that Western should be maintained as an open road, but that's a decision for your planning commission. Thank you very much for this effort, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion of this item and bring it back to the commission for discussion, comments, or any motion. Commissioner Dickerson, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious if staff would comment on the street parking and conceptually what it is where they were looking to go with this, and then perhaps address some of the things that Ms. Mora had brought up. I'm kind of curious what the balancing is here and what it is that staff was thinking versus the position that Mr. Mora has taken.
Thanks. So we have included on-street parking on both sides. It is 8 feet wide versus the typical 10-foot wide width. And so the 8-foot wide parking is what is currently the city standard for a local road. I think I'd like to maybe ask Mr. Baez if he has anything additional he'd like to add about the design of the non-standard design of the roadway and the parking. I think the overall intent was to provide parking as the option, but it is not typically on collector roads.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Baez.
Thank you, Dana. As Dana had mentioned earlier in the slides, and you may want to take a look at that again, is the standard, the deviation from the standard is actually 4 feet. And so Mr. Murray is correct. In the section that you look at south of the development, there is no on-street parking, and it's very nicely landscaped. However, and then there is on-street bike lanes. Again, no parking. The interest here is you're in front of a school, and with on-street parking, you have a traffic calming effect. Not only that, but you also have the bicyclists and pedestrians off the roadway, which is a safety enhancement. Again, a school here, vehicles on the street will slow down traffic. I would imagine in the future there will be a crossing. That location is undefined because we don't have a school site plan. But again, a little bit different. Safety enhancements to, again, pull the bicyclist and pedestrian, put them on the sidewalk off the street, and to provide a traffic calming effect with vehicle parking.
Thank you, Engineer Baez. Engineer Baez, I have a question for you. So if we're looking at the Pacific Crest project south of gosh, what is that, Battles? And then
Yes.
between Battles and Stoll, you have the parking, on-street parking, and then you have the bike lane with no parking. So if you put this in, we're going to have about 4 or 5 different roadway sections. Is that right, as you're going up Western?
As you proceed on Western, it will be south of Battles, you have no on-street parking, Class 2 bike lanes striped. When you move south in this new section, you will have a deviation where you have the bike lanes out of the right-of-way onto the sidewalk. It would be a pedestrian bicycle section. Moving north of Stoll Road, you have what we will call a Class 3, where vehicles and bicyclists are together in that section of roadway. So yes, you'll have 3 different sections. And the interest.
How do we get everything to align? I mean, one of the things that I've always noticed here in Santa Maria is these intersections never align. The center lines of the streets are always kind of off 4, 5, 6 feet from the intersection that you're at. I mean, you go across the cross street, and the center line of the street's off. Is that kind of what we're going to see, especially with more bikeways and planted buffers, and it just seems like we'd have a hodgepodge of alignments as you're traveling north or south on Western. Is that kind of what we'd expect?
Well, the center line alignment should be consistent with both sections in the new design. So when this new section is designed, the center line should line up, but you'll have a little bit of a deviation in width. Again, this new section is the difference is 4 feet, so it really isn't going to be a significant amount. Of course, the section that is south of Stoll Road, that's already an established section and not quite as modern as the sections to the south.
And then when they hit the traffic circle, is that going to be a little bit more of a because I imagine La Brea won't have this. Oh yeah, we'll have the same cross section. So I guess that wouldn't be a problem once it hits the traffic circle or traffic roundabout or whatever the term is.
So say that. Forgive me. Say that one more time.
So when this particular section, this figure 3-6, which shows the non-standard collector roadway design, when that hits that traffic circle, it shouldn't be a big problem. Shouldn't be a big deal.
No, because then you'll have the transition similar to, let's see, it would be let me think about this. How to explain this? So basically, they would cross right where the crosswalk would be on La Brea. So you'll have a transition there.
Okay. That would be across BLOSSER?
No, it's on excuse me, when you were saying that on Western at the traffic circle, excuse me, the transition will be through the crosswalk that's north-south on La Brea.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Commissioner Blanco.
Yeah, on that same topic, Chair, David, maybe you can help answer this, but on the existing section of Western south of Battles, there's no parking. And so it seems like that's worked out very nicely, kind of like Ms. Tamura pointed out. And with the conceptual site plan that we have and the way the lots are going to be configured, there's really going to be nobody parking there that's going to be walking to their residence. So what kind of parking, I mean, who's really going to park there other than, a semi truck parking there for a few hours or the night, or, vagrants or anybody else? It just seems like maybe it's maybe a waste of parking or space if there's nothing to access right out in front or even nearby. So the extra space and the larger width really is only going to encourage people to drive faster, because there's going to be fewer cars parked there. You got an 8-foot shoulder that is probably not going to get used, and so you got basically a 40-foot road that people can just barrel right down. So I don't know what my question is. Maybe it's more of a comment, but I personally don't see a huge benefit to the parking there. I think the section south of Battles on Western seems very nice and operates very well for that part of the community. So why wouldn't it work here?
Commissioner Blanco, again, we're talking about the section to the south, correct? South of Battles, correct?
Yeah, the one south of Battles that currently has no parking, right?
Correct. That one has no parking. It has on-street Class 2 bike lanes, which are striped. And you're correct, there are no access points from the roadway segment. Technically, it is illegal for vehicles to park in that section because of the striped parking. And again, the deviation from the proposed section is only 4 feet. Typically, when you have wider sections where there are no other vehicles on the roadway, it creates, you typically see higher speeds because of the openness. And whereas to the contrary, in this section where you have on-street parking, you'll have more of a traffic calming effect because vehicles will be, there is an 8-foot section, you have technically 12-foot lanes. It'll almost, when vehicles are parked there, it'll provide a traffic calming effect.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dickerson.
David, is some other way, I think when we were in a study session over the various times we've seen this, part of what we were looking for is creating, as you said, a traffic calming effect. You wanted to slow traffic down to give it more of a neighborhood feel rather than kind of an expressway feel. So, but I certainly understand what Mr. Morrow was pointing out and the other commissioners have been discussing, is that with the parking, you end up with the way this particular parking is in relation to the homes, you're going to end up with a bit of vehicle vagrancy, wandering about. And is there another way of slowing the traffic down and giving us that same kind of neighborhood slow traffic feel without necessarily having to do it with by stacking a lot of cars on either side?
There is, Commissioner Dickerson, there are opportunities to, and in fact, in a few locations within the city where we had these types of concerns from residents of speeding, what we've done is we've had what we call edge line striping. And for those of the commission who are familiar with Grant Street, there is a white stripe that is approximately 8 feet from the edge from the face of curb, and it almost looks like a bike lane. However, the effect there is, as vehicles will adhere to that stripe and stay within the confines of that area that's been delineated. Technically, it's like approximately like 12-foot lanes. If you were to mimic that in the section that is, I'll use the example just south of Battles, you can technically provide a wider bike lane, minimize the travel lane to a 12, and have the same effect. So that there are options.
So it kind of sounds like that might be, I don't know about how the other commissioners feel about the whole thing and the thing as a whole, but it sounds like that might be kind of a best of both worlds sort of things. You don't end up with parking, but you do end up with a calming effect and maybe even a little bit of additional bike space. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, there is, again, as mentioned before, there was, when you had residents who have, where their driveways front on these roadways, Grant, as an example, is we provided that edge line striping, which technically will minimize and reduce the travel lane so that as another vehicle is approaching, there is no center line, so as another vehicle is approaching, they adhere to the edge line and they stay within the confines of it. And as they pass each other, the vehicles are pushed closer together because there is no delineation where the center line's at. So that's really, there's caution as two vehicles cross each other.
Chair, Commissioner Dickerson, this is Ryan Hostetter.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but another option too would be just to, if you took the on-street parking away, just move the curb in. Just make the road narrower and eliminate the on-street parking and add landscaping, add larger trees. And that could potentially, rather than just using paint on the ground, you can actually bring the curb in more and add some landscaping and some more of an amenity, if you will. So I think there are options if the commission chooses. I think Commissioner Seifert's raising his hand.
Yeah, I saw it. Commissioner Seifert, go ahead.
Thank you. I can't do it on this thing. It's not my computer. Couple things. I used to ride my bicycle, and I would find this a little bit confusing to go from what I think is actually a very nicely laid out street. I did walk the street with Lori on Western, and it's a nice street. It looks good. The trees are growing over. We've been told in past commission meetings that canopy trees are a way to slow traffic down. This is what's happening in that area. The trees are getting very big. They're looking good. I didn't see anyone speeding on the street. I wasn't there that long. You could speed on the street. I have a real issue. I got a little side question for David. Do we have anywhere where we mix pedestrians and bicycles in the city currently?
I would say in this particular, this is new, and you have your class ones, which is the what I call it the multi-purpose trail. That goes east and west along Battles. Coincidentally, from this project, it's from Depot all the way to Bradley. There's a class one, and it's shared by both bicyclists and pedestrians. That's a good example.
To me, it would be, you get up to speeds of 17, 20 miles an hour. I know Ryan's a bicycle rider. She probably goes a lot faster than that. It's a little concerning to me when you have people and bicycles. Anytime you have bicycles with anything, it concerns me. A person could step out. There's a chance that someone could get hurt with a fast riding bicycle. You can't hear them coming from behind you. You have no idea they're there when you're walking, unless they ring a bell, which I don't find people do. It's kind of concerning when a bicycle zips by you like that, and it could be a problem. I like the way that Western is set up right now. I would be in favor of continuing Western the way it is and possibly narrowing it for more canopy trees. I think that's what we've been told in the past is a very good traffic way to slow traffic down. So I like the way it is. I think it's a good setup, and I think transitioning into this next street, it would make sense to continue, the bicyclists continue where they are, pedestrians continue where they are, and the roadway continues the way it is. That's my opinion on that. I did look at the transmission lines. We have a very high transmission line where that bridge is located, or the proposed bridge would be located. And I've dealt with PG&E on that particular line before when we were building a project. And I had to actually install one of their new poles. Those are all huge metal constructed poles that they just replaced within the last 10 years. I know they won't be moving those lines, and they're very high transmission. And I just can't see, well, I've never seen more PG&E people in my life. They came from all over the state, and actually, I think from Nevada. They flew in to look at this one pole. So I'm guessing that if we're going to be talking about a bridge in the future, which I came from a city that has bridges for pedestrians, I actually like them. But in this particular instance, I think we're going to have an issue with safety, with the high transmission lines. I'm not sure that it's going to be applicable in this area. I really don't. We have the 12 kW line, and then we have the really high transmission line, and we're proposing a bridge. So I'm not against the bridge. I'm just not sure that it's going to work in this area, and someone is going to have to look at that, because I do think it's a problem. Yeah, like the canopy trees. I'm a little concerned. I had an accident as a young driver, and I was on a street with cars parked on it, and a very young person on a big wheel flew out of a driveway into right in front of my car. So actually, no one was hurt, but I've never forgotten the incident. I couldn't have been more than 16 at the time, and it was very scary. And so anytime we mix cars and park cars with traffic, I still get that feeling when I'm driving through that traffic that something could dart out, that there's a possibility that there's going to be a kid, a ball, a thing. It makes me nervous. So I just, on the collector, on Western, I don't mind that other street section, maybe in other places that, like we were saying, Biscayne is it's not a through street. That might be a very good idea for that. But on Western, it gives me pause to think that we're going to be having school buses, kids, people driving up and down that street, cars parked, maybe a kid darts out in front of something from school. I don't know if kids walk to school anymore or not. So that's just my thought on that. So I like the project, and I'm excited to see it moving forward. That's pretty much all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Any other, I see Commissioner Hernandez, please go ahead.
Yes, I think that the suggestion that Mrs. Hofstadter made, I think may be a solution to that, because I agree with Commissioner Seifert that in the future we may have issue with the parking. And so I think it's better to either reduce the parking completely so that we're not dealing with children darting out. The request is to increase and have high density residential zone. So I believe in the future, it is going to be a big issue that we can just simply avoid by, making that recommendation as Ms. Hofstadter recommended. And I'd like to explore that option right now, if we're able to see what that would look like and see if it would make things safer, because I do agree with Commissioner Seifert that may be an issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on Commissioner Seifert's as well. Ryan had mentioned widening shortening up the lanes, but Commissioner Seifert had mentioned basically producing a wider area for more mature trees, that sort of thing. I actually think that would actually make for a very pretty and good looking site. So just as Commissioner Hernandez wanted to do, I think it'd be nice to explore either one of those and then come to a consensus on that. In regards to the bridge itself, I like bridges as well. I think they're good. I think we need to listen to Mr. Grogan and Mr. Emoto for some of the uses that they have and that they see that a bridge might function better for them and for their particular either industry or for the school's uses. So I'm leaning more towards that bridge. I do understand that we've got some issues with power lines and that sort of thing, but I think leaving the door open for the bridge as we move down the road, I think might be safer for getting pedestrians and children over that area. So that's my comments.
Commissioner Hernandez?
I would agree with the bridge decision. I think it, and I understand what Commissioner Seifert is saying. However, I do think it does alleviate and it does make the walking safer because it is likely going to be developed into a residential area. And so because of that, I would agree with Commissioner Dickerson as to the bridge.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Any other questions or comments? Or Commissioner Blanco, go ahead.
Aside from the parking and the bridge, I did have a question related to the detention basin, the 3.5 acre basin, and what the plan was for that basin at this point. Is it going to be landscaped? What is that going to look like aesthetically? I would hate for that basin to really just be kind of dirt and weeds and kind of unsightly. If you just look at some of the very, very large basins in town, like off of North BLOSSER or on A Street, I mean, they're just giant holes in the ground. They look very, very ugly. And so I'd be curious, is there going to be any passive use? Is it going to be a nice landscape basin? I mean, what is that going to look like so it's not a complete eyesore for many years to come?
Commissioner Blanco, that is part of the additional details that we are looking into. Also, the build out of that area of the specific plan will come back under a plan development permit. So you will be seeing that again. But if the map is continued today, when we bring it back, I can have more detail for you on that to present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. I had a question. So I know we're going to continue the tentative track map. Say discussions discussions with the county flood control breakdown. What happens? Is it? I was thinking about that. So if the talks break down because you guys are negotiating with the flood control district, and if they say, you know what, we're not going to do anything, or you can't put it underground, or what happens? You guys just keep it above ground and move on with the track map?
Mr. Chair, David Bayes here. That's a good question. I mean, that's a good point. What happens? And so ideally, the plan is to coordinate with flood control. The goal is to build it to flood control standards so that they can accept maintenance of the area there, the Battle Channel. Something similar would be, for those of the commission who are familiar with Harold Fletcher Park, there's a channel, there's an open channel, however, there is an underground pipe in the slope, and I believe that would be something similar to what flood control would be looking for. In the event that there is a breakdown and an agreement cannot be made, I can't speak to what would be the result. However, it's in the interest of staff that the pipe be underground because of maintenance and whatnot for the channel. Ideally, we'd like to have a trail. Obviously, with something without the open channel is nice. However, an enclosed that whole area enclosed provides an opportunity for a nice landscaped trail or what have you in that general area. So it's unknown at this part. We're working very closely with flood control to determine if there is if we can come to an agreement for the maintenance of that. But it's a work in progress. So it's hard to tell what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Baez. I have Lori, maybe can shed a little bit of light on this. Lori, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. The channel as it's designed was approved by flood control and the city of Santa Maria in about 2000. That channel runs all the way through to the A Street Basin, and it is owned, actually, right now, the right-of-way or the channel itself and Battles Road, I believe, is owned by the city of Santa Maria. So that's an off-site improvement. What we're proposing on-site is that each one of the planning areas, the commercial and the multifamily, the school and the park, all have their own stormwater plans. The basin that's being designed is for the street system and for the residential components. It will have its own bioswales, landscaping, all of the things that you need to do to address water quality is intended in this basin, and it will outflow to the existing channel. It is flood control and the city who are trying to decide whether to underground the channel or not. And that has no real direct impact to this project, other than the fact that we would have to either build a bridge for Western or, whatever crossing that's going to happen if they underground it and we're now at grade, we don't need to build a bridge. So it's in the hands of the city of Santa Maria and flood control to resolve this issue. And we'll move forward with whatever they want to do as part of the project. But the project will still go forward if they can't resolve how to underground. It'll be an open channel.
Okay, thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Schieffer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to say, I'm not against the bridge. I like bridges, and I think it is a safer way for the pedestrians to get across there. I'm just saying from a building aspect, I see it as problematic.
Thank you, Commissioner Schieffer. I just a real quick comment on the bridge. I like the bridge. I totally understand the dilemma of the large span and the high transmission lines. I don't know if they're as high as the ones on BLOSSER. As I understand, the ones on BLOSSER are staying there. But I would be in favor of keeping the bridge as part of this project. I know now that pedestrians don't have a need to cross the street mid what is that, railroad depot? What's that street? There's no need to cross from the Adams Basin Park to going west because there's no soccer fields there. But at some point when those fields get developed, it might be easier just to cross the street than go all the way up to Stoll Road and come back and come back around. So I'm in favor of that, of the pedestrian bridge. With respect to the cross section, I'm neutral on that. I have no real opinion. I just don't like the different sections along the same street. If there's some calming methods to be used, I don't know if necessarily building the sidewalk all the way or the curb all the way out would be a better solution, but whatever the commission consensus is, I'd be okay with. Anyone else have any comments or questions or would like to make a motion?
Well, can we discuss what, I guess was the consensus on the commissioners as to the bridge and as to the parking? I think there's a mixed opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Commissioner Blanco has something to add, and then maybe we can get to that discussion. Commissioner Blanco?
Maybe before we get to those discussions, I did have a few maybe questions, comments on just circulation in general. Realizing in the analysis in the SEIR and looking at the maps and the specific plan, you're looking at the intersections and realizing that there's going to be a lot more signals according to what's being proposed currently. And I did speak to David Baez a little bit about this earlier today, but the consideration for looking at some of these intersections and doing something a little bit different, the default's always been, well, if there's a problem here, just put in a signal. However, if you look at, statistics, signals are a much worse intersection control feature for accidents. And, have we looked at, and I think, it'd be a good thing to consider with a final design at some of these intersections, that we looked at alternatives. For example, one thing I mentioned to David was, looking at the intersections with Battles and Western and Stoll and Western, and potentially looking at those to be roundabouts. Not saying that a roundabout would be better at this point, but at least evaluating those and doing in the industry what they call an ICE, or an intersection control evaluation. So in other words, you take a look at the intersection, you decide, or you analyze it, and you determine what is really the best solution at the intersection. Not necessarily a signal, could be something else, could be a four-way stop, although, probably not at these locations, but it could be a roundabout too. And safety-wise, long-term, roundabouts greatly outweigh and do much better than signals from a safety perspective. And then also, talking about, I believe anyways that the roundabouts or the ones down there on College have been very successful in getting traffic through there. And College is a very busy street. And rarely do I feel like I have a very much of a delay at some of those locations on South College. And so rather than just throw a signal out and say, well, level of service now is better with a signal, and that's, we'll treat these locations with signals until we get the right level of service. I think it would be a much better evaluation to do a little bit more engineering study on these intersections to determine if a signal really is the best solution, or maybe there's a different solution that is not only safer, it's going to operate better. If you put a signal and you get reds through there, you're going to be starting and stopping at every location. If you have greens, you're going to have people speeding through yellows and trying to get through a yellow. And I think, looking at potentially a roundabout would certainly help people slow down. It would help certainly the safety situation, might even operate a lot better for traffic flow. Realizing that big trucks and buses don't generally like roundabouts, they are designed for those larger trucks, so they can easily navigate them. And so I really think strongly that those should be considered, at least evaluated at some point. And I think it could be a win-win for the city, the community, the development. And so I don't know that it's a question, other than maybe it's a comment at this point. But I think it's something that I would want to see at least evaluated before the final design and the final map gets recorded.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. Commissioner Hernandez?
Yes, Commissioner Blanco brings up a good point, and my question to staff is, how would roundabouts affect this? And maybe this is a question for Mr. Baez in terms of the future development. Would that really affect the traffic flow, or do you think that it would help it? And I agree with Commissioner Blanco that sometimes the traffic lights do create more issues because it is more of a stop and go instead of just a slower, steady flow. So I guess that is a question for Public Works.
Thank you, Commissioners. The two of the signals that have been identified, Battles and Western and Stoll, they're both identified in the growth mitigation program as intersection control features, meaning that it's not specific to a signal. A roundabout could possibly be entertained at those intersections. Typically, when you design roundabouts, right-of-way acquisition is the key thing here. Now, with half of the intersection already developed, this will push the development of a roundabout into the newly developed area, which will you'll have a skewed intersection, which will push the intersections into the development. But however, as Commissioner Blanco had mentioned, is we can coordinate with the design engineer and take a look at that and see what will it entail to accommodate a roundabout there. So and what he had mentioned earlier was an intersection control evaluation, meaning let's look at all the options, and we can we can convey that to the, well, Mr. Murray is here, and so we can convey that to the engineer as well.
And if the commission chooses that, something like that, what we could do in the specific plan is make the language flexible enough to allow for that to occur. So rather than have, for example, on figure 3-4, where it talks about proposed circulation, it shows lights. So we could not show lights there, but we can use the terminology that David just used that's in the in our plan already, intersection control, is that right?
Feature, intersection control feature.
Yeah, so we could use that language instead of a light, and then the analysis through the map with the future developer. And we have to work on what's going to happen with the drainage channel as well, because that will weigh in heavily on that design, but it would allow that flexibility.
Does the applicant have any comments as to that? Would they prefer the flexibility?
My first response, again, thank you very much, Lori Tamura. My first response would be, I can appreciate what Commissioner Blanco referred to in the traffic circles and roundabouts, but those were designed as brand new developments, and there was nothing existing on any of the corners. And when the Bradley Squares project was built and when the shopping centers were built. And so it was easy to design those nice big features. We have basically the potential for half circles because half of the circle is already developed, and we would be either tearing down homes, taking out sidewalks and curbs and everything else in order to make a right circle or a skewed circle if it was all bent over into our properties, and it's a substantial amount of real estate. The fact of the matter is, there's traffic studies already done. The analysis has been completed. These intersections improvements were done with the AB 1600 program entailed, and I think that the city does their engineering right, and we should continue with what we have to complete the last missing piece of this area. And so, again, I can appreciate what has been discussed here, but I think when we start annexing land on the east side of the freeway and we have green fields to design, that's when you do a whole series of roundabouts and you do a whole lot of innovative stuff because you have a clean slate to work with. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any other questions or comments for the commission or any further discussion? I do like the roundabout idea. I didn't like roundabouts initially, but gosh, they're great. I like them.
Commissioner?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Seifert and then Commissioner Dickerson.
Thank you, sir. I like roundabouts too. I hated them to begin with, but I'm not sure about, Battles is a very big street. It's very wide right now. I think it's 4 lanes, isn't that correct, David? So I'm not sure about pushing over onto this new property if that's actually going to happen on a roundabout, but I would like the ability to at least look at it. The roundabouts, in my opinion, work much better than traffic signals. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Dickerson.
I concur with Commissioner Seifert. I think Commissioner Blanco brought up a really good point, especially if you take a look at the statistics for Santa Maria as a whole. There's an awful lot of yellow lights being run, red lights being run, and it seems to me that we end up with a disproportionate amount of traffic problems, accidents because of lights. If we can shift to roundabouts where there is generally a continuation of flow of traffic, then you end up in a much safer environment that potentially could save lives. So I do understand that it takes up a little bit more terrain, and that's never terribly good. But on the other hand, we might be looking at a safety issue that we could, for that extra little bit of terrain, we could end up saving a few lives over the next few years. So from that standpoint, I think that at the very least, we should be taking a look at it through one of these ice reviews. And so there we go. That's my idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Okay, well, I think the Maribel, I don't know if Commissioner Hernandez, I don't know if the consensus is there for, I guess the consensus is there for the study that for traffic circles. I don't know if we have a consensus on the cross section of the street, but that might go with the study of the traffic circle, because now your alignment or what have you might be a little different. Would you still like to get a consensus on the street sections, Commissioner Hernandez?
Yeah. Well, before we make a motion, I think it'd be a good idea to get a consensus as to the parking.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with no parking on street. So keeping the cross section similar to what is on south of Battles.
I concur with the chair.
I concur also.
Yeah, I concur.
Commissioner Blanco, you had your hand raised?
Well, I was just going to say that I concur, and you're talking a little bit about the points we made earlier with bicycle riders, and Commissioner Seifert mentioning that, it's not a good mix to have cyclists and pedestrians. Well, I think if you turn that parking into a bike lane, then I think, your more advanced riders, like Ryan, could be on the street, and, Tom, your kids could be, in the joint use trail, and the lower level riders could be, along the pedestrian. So I think that would be both worlds, and I think it works out.
Okay,
so
great.
Consensus for no off-street parking and to explore a roundabout option. Am I correct?
Right, and then the pedestrian bridge sounded like there was consensus to keep that in the specific plan.
Okay.
So with that, if we want to have further discussion on anything else, or we'd like to have some sort of motion, we have a 1, 2, 3 resolutions and then a continuance. Resolution would start at 2785. That would be for the environmental resolution.
Yeah, I move that by resolution, recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution to certify a supplement environmental impact report and adopt a statement of overriding considerations and a mitigation monitoring program for the proposed project.
Do we have a second?
I second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Seifert. May we please have a roll call? This is Resolution 2785.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye.
I move that by resolution recommend that the City Council approve the specific plan amendment to Area 5B only SPZ 2016-0002.
A second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez. Hold on, I think you lost me. Is that for the land, that's for the land use map amendment, right, in zone change?
That's a specific plan amendment.
That'd be C, right?
Yeah, that, I think we skipped over.
Did we skip B?
Yeah, we skipped B.
Somebody's on the agenda.
Looking straight at the agenda or at the report.
Okay, because Ryan, is that I'm looking at the one online. I have A is the environmental, B is the general plan zone change.
Commissioner Dickerson, we'll pull it up and share the screen so that everybody's looking at the same thing. And then we'd also ask if Commissioner Hernandez would include the proposed changes too.
Okay.
Right, but that would be for.
Or with the changes that the commission wanted to see.
Right, but that would be for C or B?
There's no.
Okay, so you guys also have it as item 2.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Your online stuff is different from the actual printed thing. Okay.
Okay, so then.
So can you put it on the screen?
Pull up the agenda as well.
Are you sharing the screen? Are you sharing that?
But it's different, right, on the agenda? So
It is.
we're going to pull up the agenda.
Okay.
Dana's under the gun.
She's fine.
Oh, that's the staff report. It's different. The agenda. Yeah.
Think of it as alphabetical order. The general comes first.
That's okay. And as we pull this up, a part of this, we request that the map be continued off calendar.
Right, right.
So would you like me to do that one next? The tentative track map?
Oh, here we go.
That's what I'm,
Yeah, so that one is so nice.
Because the one I'm looking at is from the
On the online agenda.
the portal, the planning commission portal.
That's what we have up. Now I can't see it on Zoom.
just scroll down a little bit.
Yeah. Let's just show it on Zoom. Commissioner Seifert has it.
It was there briefly, Maribel. Just go ahead and do it by memory. You saw it for a moment.
Photographic memory. So should I move on to the general plan and land use? Should that be number 2?
Walk them through it verbally, Dana?
Okay, so we're,
Yeah, that's number 2.
Okay.
Yeah, or B.
okay, so we're having a little trouble screen sharing at the moment, so I'll just walk you through each of the items.
Actually, that doesn't.
Okay, so we took action on item A.
not
So
what
then item B is by resolution, recommend that the
have
city
one,
council approve the specific plan amendment for Area 5B only, SPZ 2016-0002, and then it would be with the changes to the specific plan that were discussed tonight.
Okay, so again, it's still different than, I don't know where I got my, I'm on the August 5 PC agenda, but we can certainly go that route. That would be,
That would have been, that would have been B per the agenda that was online. So I don't know if there's any legal reason why we need to do it in one versus the other, but that's the way it went online.
Okay, so I move that by resolution, we recommend that the city council approve the specific plan amendment to Area 5B only, SPZ 2016-0002, with the recommendations to keep the bridge, to have no off-street parking, and to explore the roundabout as an option for the project.
okay, and that would be resolution 2786.
2786, yes.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think I heard Commissioner Blanco. It's been seconded by Commissioner Blanco. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hernandez? Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco?
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert?
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson?
Aye.
Chair Lopez?
Aye.
Okay. The third one is, I move that by resolution, recommend that the city council approve the general plan land use map amendment and zone change for Area 5B, GPZ 2016-0003.
That would be by resolution 2786. 87. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Commissioner
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert,
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye.
And I move that by resolution, we recommend that the city council,
We're going to continue.
that we continue the tentative track map TR 2019-003. And we do, I guess it's going to be taken off calendar. So that is the resolution.
Okay.
2088.
Actually, does that get a resolution number at this point or not until we actually vote on it?
It would just be a motion to continue. We do not have a resolution for that tonight.
Okay, perfect.
I'm just going to move that we continue the tentative track map TR 2019-0003.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Blanco. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye. Thank you very much, staff and the BLOSSER project. Congratulations, and we'll look at seeing you in the near future for the tentative track map. Okay. Thank you, Lori. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 3. Do you need some time to set up?
Yes, please, if we could have just
Okay.
a 5-minute break.
Okay, absolutely. Let's take a 5-minute break at
Thank you so
the current
much.
time.
Now go.
Yes, can you hear me now? Commissioners?
Dana, can Ryan hear me?
So let's
Unmute.
All right.
There, now go. Go. Now go. Can you hear now?
On that one?
I can hear you, Kathleen, but I can't hear Ryan.
Okay.
Oh, no. There should be an unmute all.
I unmuted here.
I just, either Dana or Ryan, either one. I just had a quick question. On this agenda item 3, is this a motion? What are we supposed to do with this thing here? It just says that the planning commission recommend. Are we doing a motion or a resolution?
He can't hear me, so.
It's just, I think it's just a motion, Commissioner Dickerson, and then we'll take a roll call just to move the recommendation up to the city council.
I thought so, but it just didn't say so in the thing, on my sheet, so I just wanted to ask. Okay, thanks.
No, I'm wrong.
Are we back?
Can you hear me? No.
Yes, Ryan, I can.
Oh. All right, all the commissioners can hear me okay?
Yes.
We're needing another moment to bring everybody back to the tables here. All right, so I'm not muted on there. It should show an icon next to. Yep. Okay, how is that better?
Are you asking the commission or the Zoom
Sure,
people?
Chair Lopez, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Are we ready to reconvene?
I think Kathleen is still working on a couple things.
Oh,
One
okay.
second. Thank you.
I got it. I had it unmuted.
Okay, I think we're all here now.
Okay.
Okay,
Here
Chair.
we go. Let's go ahead and come back to order at 8:47. Item number 3, Senate Bill 743, implementation in the city of Santa Maria as required by state law. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is Ryan Hofstadter, Planning Manager. And along with me on Zoom, we have Jim Damkowicz and Aaron Vaca, who are with DKS and Associates. Just so you're aware, they're on there. And I think we have Carrie Zajac from Rincon and Associates as well. And so, as you can see on our title slide here, this is the SB 743. It's a new Senate bill. Let's see. Oh, now my slide's not advancing. Hold on. There we go. So I'm just gonna skip to the next slide. It's a Senate bill. It was actually adopted and signed in 2013. So it's been around a little bit, and the state has given jurisdictions some time to roll it out because of the major changes that it imposes on larger projects. So what this means is we're here today to adopt some local standards that developers would be using on projects. And so we'll go through what those are, but that's why we're here before your commission, is because we're asking you to make a recommendation to the city council about some maps that we're proposing based on different modeling scenarios. So we're gonna choose a map, a baseline. We're gonna choose a threshold for the city, and we're gonna choose some screening criteria. So that's just an overview of what you're gonna see. And again, as you see on this slide before you, this is a result of a new state law, and all jurisdictions are going through this as we speak, and the law is actually in effect July 1st. So what this slide is talking about, it's talking about thresholds. So I'll back up just a moment. This new law applies to larger projects that are subject to CEQA. So there's a lot of projects that occur that are exempt from CEQA. This wouldn't apply to those. It wouldn't apply to small projects. These are projects that need environmental documents. And for the transportation or the traffic section, we're using a new metric. And instead of what we typically would use as level of service that talks about a letter grade related to congestion, now SB 743 talks about vehicle miles traveled. And so on this screen, what we're talking about here are thresholds, and a threshold would be a line in the sand, if you will, for which a project would have to meet. It would have to meet a certain number in order to mitigate its VMT. And so that threshold is what your commission is going to be recommending. And I'm going to ask Jim, who's on right now. Jim Damkowicz is with DKS and Associates, and he's going to go through the technical components of SB 743 and turn it back over to me later on for some closing and wrap up. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Ryan, and feel free to jump in where you want. And anyway, hello, Chairman Loeb and members of the commission. Some of you saw our workshop on this very topic roughly a month ago. This is the same example that I presented at that, so this should look pretty familiar, and I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. But so this whole difference between vehicle miles traveled or VMT relative to level of service. And just this is a schematic that kind of tries to spell out the differences between the two. So theoretically, there's a housing development. Instead of being out in the suburbs, it's located more downtown. That's really the goal here from the state. They would like greater land use efficiency. So you can think of this as an infill project, a residential infill project. Whereas there's relatively few vehicle trips because more trips can be taken with alternative modes being downtown. You can walk, you can bike, transit's more accessible downtown. And so there's just less VMT. Next slide. There are still vehicle trips associated with that development, and what little vehicle trips do occur, they're occurring on some of the more congested roadways, and that's your downtown. So there's less VMT, vehicle miles traveled, but there's more level of service impacts. So prior to July 1st, a development like this would actually have a hard time getting through the CEQA process because of all these impacts, and they'd be very expensive. It's very hard to retrofit existing infrastructure. It's expensive. So this kind of project would, might get revised or not go through at all just based on the number of impacts it would face. Next slide. So instead, hypothetically, the development gets pushed out to the suburbs, and it's roughly the same number of units, but it's less dense because there's lower density requirements in the suburbs. And so what happens here, you locate out there, out in the suburbs, and you have much longer trip lengths, and you go to different locations, but you still want to go downtown because there's lots of goods and services and things that are necessities in life that you would want to go there. But what happens is, next slide, there's relatively few level service impacts, basically where all those trips load onto the major network, where that orange circle is.
Sorry.
But you have much greater VMT. So it's not as efficient from a land use perspective, but this is the kind of developments and the kind of geographic locations that developments go to under the paradigm that we used to be under, which was level of service. Now that it's VMT, the hope is that more and more developments will be attracted where there's already development or developed areas. Next slide. So real quick, level of service, this is what you've been accustomed to. You're probably very familiar with it. It's basically looking at the amount of delay that vehicles experience on the roadway. And as Ryan said, they go from A, letter grades A, which is very little delay or no delay, to level service F, where you see a lot of queuing, a lot of delay, and a lot of frustration. Some characteristics of level service is that you always can establish a new baseline. It's very simple. You can just go out and do traffic counts, and you establish a very up-to-date baseline of your existing conditions. Level service is also very location specific. In other words, if an intersection is failing, you know that it's failing at that location, and you have a really good idea, being David Baez and a city engineer, you'll know exactly which turning movement is causing the problem. So the mitigation is typically very straightforward, but it usually results in adding capacity. Next slide. So now under VMT, it's a different ballgame. So you have your, and how do you calculate VMT? Well, it's the sum of your trip length as you, in this particular example, you have your home, you drive 1 mile to your school to drop off your child, you're then off to your work, which is another 12 miles. While you're at work, you may want to go to lunch, you use your vehicle, and that's a round trip of 1 mile. And then your workday ends, you drive to the gym, which is about 8 miles, and then another 6 miles back home, and you sum that all up, and it's 28 miles. And so the characteristics of vehicle miles traveled is that it's very difficult to establish a baseline for a community. I mean, this example is one person, but there's many people that live in Santa Maria. So really the only way you can do it is through modeling. And then also it's not location specific. Vehicle miles traveled is a systemic metric. In other words, it's system-wide, and so you're capturing a very system-wide effect that a particular development project can have. And because of that, mitigation is difficult because it's not location specific. VMT doesn't really generate projects that you can really focus in on to solve an issue. It's a very poor metric to indicate congestion. It's not a congestion metric. It's a utilization metric. So typically, mitigation focuses on the land use definition itself. Changing the project can probably have the most impact to reduce the VMT it creates. Or it can be programmatic, where programs such as providing transit subsidies or providing employee benefits that relate to ride sharing and things that gives a employee options to not have to drive alone to work. So those are the big differences between the two metrics. Next slide. And so I mentioned modeling, and I won't go into this too heavily, but in modeling, the way it works, and the city has their own travel demand model. SBCAG, your regional MPO agency, has a county-wide, actually 3-county model. And so it takes a look at all various trip types, and it puts all the land use and creates zones, which are called traffic analysis zones. And so based on the land use within each zone, you know how much trips are being generated, vehicle trips. You also understand through modeling what zones are sending trips to other zones and vice versa. You also estimate based on survey data how many of those trips are being taken by vehicles and how many are being taken by transit or some other mode. And then obviously the path or the roadway network that is used to traverse from one zone to another to meet a particular trip type. And so models have always been very good at estimating volumes on roadways. So those are often used for not only noise analysis, but also level of service analysis. It's always generated vehicle miles of travel. That's one of the best outputs of a travel demand model. That has always been used for air quality analysis, but now it's its own metric under CEQA for circulation. And so that's the big difference. slide. And so I mentioned SB-CAG's model, and that is the model that we're using to generate these thresholds and baseline information. And the reason being is that the Office of Planning and Research from the state, they are very adamant, and this is their strong recommendation, that the trip length should represent the full trip length and not be truncated at jurisdictional boundaries. And so the city's model is strictly that. It's the city model, does include Orchid, but everywhere around that area, the trip length just gets truncated or cut off. So we can't estimate the full trip length of BMT of trips that are coming and going to and from the city or to other cities or outside the county. So the SB-CAG model can do that. It's got a much larger modeling domain. So we're capturing the full trip length of trips that either have one origin or one destination in the city of Santa Maria. And as part of this exercise, I will say that we are trying to develop, we will develop a sketch planning tool that is easy to use, that the city staff can use, as well as assist the development community, so they don't have to run a full travel demand model. That will create a sketch planning tool that is informed by many model runs and emulates the same results. So that's going to be part of our work as well. Next slide. So what are the thresholds of significance? And these are recommendations from OPR. You really do want to be consistent with what the state is saying, because if you're not, you open yourself up to potential challenge from third parties. And so the thresholds that we're proposing for residential uses, you need to be 15% below an existing baseline. Now, that existing baseline, you do have some choices, because there's different ways you can calculate a BMT baseline. You can use a county-wide average, an area-wide average, which is the city of Santa Maria and the Orchid area, or you can just use your city-wide average, and we'll give you some examples of what those look like. And that's a per capita metric. In other words, it's average BMT per person for a residential development. And what that means is that it normalizes for size. So your BMT per capita can be the same for a residential development that has 100 houses or units relative to a development that has 500 units, right? So the size is not the issue. It's just how efficient are those trips on a per capita basis. For non-residential uses, where the work trip primarily drives the BMT associated with that development, and that would be office development, service developments, manufacturing, industrial, it's 15% below the existing baseline, but that's also a per service population, as they say, metric. At this time, it's average BMT per employee, which makes sense. So that's your residential and non-residential. And then for other purposes like, or land use types, retail just redistributes trips. It doesn't necessarily generate trips. And so for that, the OPR recommends just the net change in BMT determines whether there's an impact or not. So with, what's the VMT without the project? What's the VMT with the project? And if it's lower, then no impact. And that makes a lot of sense. New retail uses come in where folks would have to travel 7 miles for the same services and goods. A new retail store comes in and now they're only driving 2 or 3, and maybe they can walk or ride their bike. So retail does serve to just redistribute trips rather than generate them. There's other uses that don't fall nicely in these categories, such as recreational type land uses. Hospitals is another one that's kind of different. So OPR recommends a net VMT impact for those as well. And then for infrastructure, when there's an infrastructure improvement that the city desires, those are often have to be looked at as well if they're large enough and cannot be screened, and that's a net VMT impact as well. So I mentioned infrastructure, and so you might be wondering what types of infrastructure projects do we have to look at? And the good news is that there's a lot of infrastructure improvement types that are screened out, which means that the city council has the legal basis to give them a pass, that you don't have to do a VMT analysis. And obviously these are some of the major categories. So roadway maintenance and rehab projects get a pass. Signal timing, signal synchronization, or adaptive signal control types, or signal preemption for emergency vehicles, those are all exempt. Intersection control types, you were talking about roundabouts, that's a control type. So converting a non-signalized intersection to a roundabout, or modifying a signalized intersection to a roundabout gets a pass. If you want to just add turn lanes for better channelization, that's a pass as well. You just can't add through lanes, but if you can add as many turn lanes as you want. You can widen some roadways, and those are your lower functional classes, your local streets, and your local collector streets. However, if you plan to widen your arterials or higher functional classifications, those would probably need to be looked at. And then last but not least, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian infrastructure all gets a pass under the new law. So screening criteria. So I've already talked about some of them, but there are others. So these are the 5 big screening criteria as they relate to projects. So if a development comes in that's within half a mile of a high quality transit line, it gets a pass. And a high quality transit line is when there's 2 or more service lines that are providing bus service or rail service that has 15-minute headways or less. So it's very specific, and that criteria currently is not met here in the city of Santa Maria, but there's no reason why at some point it can. And so along Main Street, you see Route 135, those are the facilities that will most likely start approaching possibly meeting that criteria. And then any development, whether it be residential or non-residential, that locates within a half mile, it would be screened out. So that's a really big incentive for transit facilities. Small projects. Those are projects that generate less than 100 trips. And I think Ryan's going to give you some examples of what those could look like. Affordable housing developments are given a pass, and you can define that in several different ways. Farm worker housing is one important issue here in the city of Santa Maria, given the agricultural base of your economy. And Ryan will speak to that as well. And then locally serving retail, if it's under 50,000 square feet, it's given a pass because it's considered local and it's just serving local needs. Anything over 50,000 would be considered less local and more regional, which potentially should be looked at for VMT analysis. And then last but not least, location in a low VMT generating area. And so that's the maps that Ryan was alluding to earlier. And we've created several map types based on different geographic baselines for you to look at and choose from. But I'll pass it to Ryan. Ryan, did you want to speak to these examples of projects that fall under the 110 daily trips?
Sorry, I forgot to turn my microphone on. Sure. So we have some screening criteria that we would like to put into this project. And Jim mentioned a few of them that really come from the state. And so we'd like to incorporate all the state minimum screening criteria. But also we asked for some examples of, okay, what is a small project? So on the slide are some examples of what would be screened, things that would be less than that 110 trip mark. So I don't think I'm going to read all of them, but There's lots of different examples, and it's essentially your smaller 11 units of a single family, multifamily, mid-rise, 20 units. These are things that would be under that trip limit, so they could be screened out. So the maps that we've been talking about this is what we're asking, one of the key pieces of this that we're asking your commission to make a recommendation on, that the state would like us to do. And so based on the research that DKS did, we used these different mapping areas that were modeled. And so we have a county-wide, we have the city-wide, and I'm just going to go through these maps kind of quickly and then go backwards and back up to them so you can really see the differences between them. And the first few maps are for, these are, I'm going to call them the work trips. So this isn't for a residential project. This would be for an employment type project. So when we use the baseline model for the geography of the county-wide, this is the map. So if you were an employment generating project, you weren't meeting any of the screens, if you weren't a small project, and you were in a red area, then you're going to need to do VMT analysis and propose some mitigation measures for your project. So that's this mapping area. So I'm going to go the area-wide average. The thing with the employment mapping is they were all very similar. So that was county-wide, area-wide, city average. They're almost the same. So there's a couple little arrows. I don't think you can see. Here, that was a difference. That parcel was a difference, but they were really almost the same, minus a couple portions of the city. So for employment, they were pretty close. Now I'm going to go to residential. This is where the big difference is. So this is where it's really key for a developer of a residential project. It would make a big difference which map you decided to choose as your baseline. So the county-wide, this is what that one looks like. Area average, a lot more red on there. And then the city average. So for the employment ones, there wasn't that much of a difference. For the residential, there's a big difference. So our staff recommendation is to allow the most amount of flexibility. And we don't get to pick one for the employment and then one for the residential. You get to pick one baseline for everything. So that's why we recommend the county-wide, because of the huge difference it would mean for a residential development in the city. So that's what the maps are. And so I'm going to continue on. And I think, Jim, were you going to talk about mitigation? Basically, when you're in one of those areas there and you're in that red zone and you're not a screened out project, then we do VMT analysis for your project and you need to get below a threshold. And we'll talk about what that threshold is going to be in a moment. But there are mitigations that your project can propose to get below that number. So I think Jim even brought up a couple of these already. And it really just depends on the project and it's specific to the project. Maybe I'll just keep going, and then Jim, if you think of anything that I'm missing here, to just interrupt me. One of the biggest differences with this presentation tonight versus the study session is I asked our team, I asked DKS to help us with some real life examples. So I wanted to show you what this means with regards to projects. So we have 4 projects. These are real projects. 2 are new and 2 are old projects. So the first 2 are new projects that are we're reviewing, they're in process, and then the other two are projects that have already happened. So the first one is it's an agricultural industrial type of project. This applicant proposes boxes, the boxes that are used for your produce. And the project includes a cooler facility, and that's off Stowell. And you might remember that California Truck Center project. This would be right next to it, so it's right in that area. The second project is a proposal for a zone change on BLOSSER, and the change is to go from a industrial, light industrial, to a general commercial. And then the third project is that California Truck Center project that's already gone through the Planning Commission, so you'd be familiar with that. And then the last one is a residential project. It's a multifamily project off McCoy, the Refugio project, which you may remember. So I'm going to show you what these look like on the maps. So let me get my cursor out here. This is the first project location, second project location, third. So that first one is that agricultural box project. And so they were not able to be screened out. So that is on here. There's no screening. They're a big enough project. They need to do VMT analysis and look at ways to mitigate it. And it's really for their, mostly their employees. So this isn't for trucking or distribution. The state did not include that in this law. That's regulated separately. This is for light vehicles, so this would be all the employee side. So that would be in that area, if you can see my cursor. I don't know if on Zoom you guys can see it, but it's number 1 there, so it's in the red. So that one needs a look at VMT. They need to do the study. The second project, here we go, is on BLOSSER here near La Brea, and that's the zone change to general commercial. Also in the red area, and let me go back to my table. It's not screened out. It includes employment uses. So depending on, we're going to get more information, how many employees, what we're looking at, that one probably needs to do a look at VMT as well. And then number 3 was that truck center project. That one was a little different. It's a dealership. And so not as much, it's heavy equipment dealership. So for VMT, let me go back. We could possibly screen that one out. So as you're seeing, the mapping is really important, that map that you choose, and the type of project and whether or not it can be screened out. And then the last one, the Refugio project, because remember there was a big difference on the residential maps. This is number 4 here, and on the map on the right side is for residential. That one would have been in the green area, so that one would have been okay. So that is why we recommend choosing that county-wide mapping as a part of this project as our baseline. So again, these are the choices that you have. We recommend the county-wide. And then this is what it means in terms of numbers. So the state is asking that we get 15% better on residential and employment trips. So that's what these numbers correspond to. And then that's net change for other uses. So this is the number that's going to be used on these projects if we choose the countywide. It's going to be the home-based work will be, I think that's Santa Maria. It's that 9.41 gets you below. And then for residential, it's going to be 6.17. So I know that's kind of technical But essentially, that's the line in the sand, that's the threshold that we would be using based on those county-wide maps. So we've looked at a screening, some screening criteria already, and in the state guidance, it talks about affordable housing. And I've talked with the team a little bit, and we looked at, for example, Goleta as an example, because they literally just went through this project, and they used a 20%. And I put that in my staff report. However, I'm having a second thoughts based on state density bonus law. So, I would recommend being consistent with the state. So if a project complies with the state density bonus law, then I would recommend that those projects be screened. And I can show what that is in a little bit. But it depends on the percentage of projects. And they have to be deed restricted affordable. And so those would be screened out. Also included would be senior housing. Those would be screened out. And I would recommend that farm worker housing projects be screened out. And that would make sense too, because they just operate differently. They use the van pool services, and it's a totally different kind of a use. And then I'd also recommend we go with the state, with the minimums for your local retail, the 50,000 square foot threshold. So let's see. Another piece of this whole thing that we haven't talked about much, this is level of service. And we've been working with Public Works. That's still a very important metric for the city. And we'd ask the commission to retain that. And I believe it sounds like, based on talking to the team, Jim and his team working with other jurisdictions, everybody is maintaining a level of service as well. And that's really so that you can get those infrastructure improvements that are needed for projects. And I don't know if David wanted to weigh in any more on that. David Baez from Public Works, we've been working together on this.
Thank you, Ryan. You pretty much covered it. That yes, the city's we want to maintain LOS as a local policy, and as Ryan mentioned, again, she pretty much covered everything. We will maintain the AB 1600 program project list so that we can look at making improvements because we were concerned with delay, and again, the level of service is not tied to the environmental document as VMT is now taking over. We will continue to maintain LOS similar to pretty much every city in the state of California, with the exception of maybe two with big municipalities. I think it's San Francisco and can't remember the other one, but pretty much every municipality is continuing with the LOS. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So the big thing with that is, so on these projects, just to refresh everybody, projects that are larger, that can't be screened out, that aren't exempt from CEQA, will need VMT and look at their traffic impacts to the city's infrastructure to keep that LOS standard for the city. So what does this all mean? We're asking your commission to recommend to City Council a few things. So adopt a baseline in the threshold, adopt the screening criteria, and what we're going to do moving forward is work on that sketch planning tool that Jim had mentioned. That really comes later, and that's more of a working tool for projects in the future so we can enter them in. And then we want to update our environmental procedures with the City of Santa Maria. So all the stuff is going to get worked into those environmental procedures, and that document will go to City Council. So these are the actual items on your slide that staff is recommending. We recommend the MAP, that's the county-wide one, and that gives the most flexibility, as you remember, for those, especially those residential projects. we set the threshold of significance at the state minimum, and those are listed here for residential. It's the 15% below that baseline. For office, employment generating industrial 15%, and then the state would require other uses as any net change. And then we also recommend the screening criteria listed here as well. And I think that was the end of our presentation. We're available for questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there any questions from the commission for staff? I just had a kind of a real simple one. Jim, maybe you can answer this. So as I understand the vehicle mile trips but here's what I'm getting at. It's as we go to go away from oil, say we were all electric cars, is the real metric that's used, is it really air quality or is it carbon footprint? What is it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A lot of people think it was all about air quality, but I think that a better response is just more efficiency, greater land use efficiency. Our land use patterns should promote choices in modes to achieve a lot of the trip types that people want to or need to make. And so it's better if they're shorter. Because good things can happen. You disperse the trips among different modes. So it's really efficiency. A lot of folks will say it's all about the Sacramento Kings Arena because that's where it was spawned from in terms of that development. So I'm being a little sarcastic there, but yeah, big question. A lot of folks still think it's all about air quality, but it's really not. It's about efficiency and land use efficiency.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions from the commission for staff? Commissioner Dickerson.
Yeah, I had a question about the farm worker housing. There was obviously a lot of controversy a couple of years ago now about farm worker housing and specifically smaller projects where where someone would buy up a house in a neighborhood and then hot bunk the house. And so the question I have is for the criteria screening, how would putting farm worker housing, how would that impact smaller projects like we were just talking about versus larger projects if we decided to go down the road of doing some sort of a campus style farm worker housing?
So for smaller projects, it wouldn't apply. So for those single-family homes, basically anything that requires a land use permit that needs a CEQA document. So there's a lot of projects that don't need that, and a lot of small projects. This wouldn't apply. So this would apply to your larger campus, greenfield projects where you're building a new. It's similar to like a large multifamily project, except for it would be a large farm worker housing project. We would ask that it be treated similar to like an affordable housing project because those are screened out. So that's why we were characterizing that as being potentially similar, even though it's a little bit unique and maybe even less VMT because of the way they operate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Any other questions for staff?
Chair?
Yes.
So it doesn't seem like it's based on smog or anything. It seems like it's more based on trying to jam everybody into smaller spaces and not let people live away from the city. Is that basically what Jim, is that basically what we're talking about here?
That would likely be the tendency that the way VMP works, it does make the locations within the city or within developed areas more attractive or less cumbersome to get through CEQA.
So basically the state is telling us where we can and can't live. And in the age of COVID, they've decided that we all need to live closer together. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that, yes, and what the state is saying is you need to do more analysis. Not that you can't, but that if you do, if you choose to grow in that way, then you need to do this analysis and show how you can include some mitigation. Maybe it's greatly increasing a bus route to that area, or some type of bike connection, or some way to bring that VMT down. And if you can't, then that means that it's a potentially significant impact and you do an EIR. And if you still can't bring it down, then you'd have to figure out a way to adopt overriding findings. So it goes through those layers. So it's not that you can't, it's that you do analysis, you try to mitigate it, and then if you can't, you have to do an environmental impact report.
Everything that you just said has a cost. So
That's
what we're
right.
talking about is increasing the cost of housing, increasing the cost of where we work. So unless we follow these guidelines, we're basically penalized, and we will be paying more to try to get these other projects through, if they can even get through with all the new regulations.
Well, I'll just add that one of the key goals of SB 743 was CEQA streamlining. CEQA is very expensive to go through the environmental process. So you've heard a lot about screening and these sort of things. It's really what the state intended was to make the right kinds of projects get a free pass and give the decision-making bodies the legal basis to give those developments a free pass. So it's really about CEQA streamlining, and as one of the goals. But the metrics do tend to make certain types of developments more attractive, but those that can show that they are that type of project, they're going to save a lot of money because CEQA will be less arduous.
So if we build 5-story buildings and move everybody into the city, we won't have these extra mitigation fees. We'll be doing everything that the state wants, but we'll be packing people into living areas that we're finding now through health requirements might not be the best idea. So it's not really a question, just a statement. So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Any other questions or comments for our consultant or staff? Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, so to address Commissioner Seifert's concerns, so ideally, if you wanted to level the playing field as much as is possible under this new regime, you would basically eliminate virtually all screening, so then everybody basically works under the same rules, as much as they can, outside the density areas versus inside the density areas. Is that accurate?
If you want to look at this as kind of a way to incentivize, yeah.
So the fewer screening criteria we have, the more likely it is that that these type of things, affordable projects based on state density law, bonuses, that sort of thing, that they would not necessarily be pushed into these higher density areas. They could just as easily go outside the areas, because in essence they're going to have the same expenses as somebody outside the areas. It's only when they move into the into these other areas and they get a screening criteria bonus that they get a break.
Right, but they would still, to locate anywhere you want, if it's a given size and doesn't meet the other screening criteria, it would have to do a VMT analysis and would have to mitigate those VMT impacts. So VMT is a metric. Even if you get rid of all the screens, it will still have the effect of making certain types of development in certain geographic areas less impactful by nature of the metric.
Yeah. So Commissioner Seifert is in essence correct that even if you were to strip it away to its most bare bones, it is guiding or pushing us towards a very specific type of development of your community. Sounds like.
It wants infill to be more efficient and development that gets farther away from your services and your urban core and your employment and your shopping to be more difficult.
Can you explain to me the bank and what that is about? What are we buying things? Are we selling things? What is the bank that you mentioned also, Jim?
Yeah, so that, that's the concept, and it may be something that Santa Barbara County as a whole may consider. So a VMT bank it's a concept. It kind of is very similar to a greenhouse gas or emissions bank, how that works. But how it works is that, let's say a project comes in and it shows that its VMT is well under the threshold. So it's a very low VMT increasing development. Well, the proportion or the portion of the VMT that falls below that can be banked, and it sits in a VMT bank. And then let's say a year later, another development comes in to the city and it exceeds the VMT threshold. That developer can buy the VMT that's in the VMT bank to basically offset, and the city will allow the VMT to go over the threshold. But as form of mitigation, the second developer will merely purchase the VMT savings. And so overall, the city is meeting the goal of the program or the law, that is providing maximum flexibility for developers basically to buy and trade VMT. So it's for something like that to work, you really do need a regional agency to act as the banker, and all the local jurisdictions would have to buy in on that. So as one city is not more attractive than the other in terms of development, that already goes on to some degree because different fees are charged depending on the jurisdiction. But really the way that model would work is that SBCAG would administer the VMT bank, and all the cities and the county of Santa Barbara County would be a part of it.
Would the VMT themselves, would that be part of some sort of a free market, or would that be a standardized price per unit?
That's a good question. That can, depending on how you would want to set it up, I think that's one of the decision points, how you can value the VMT or evaluate it. But it's an interesting concept. I can say that there's areas around the state that are seriously looking at that. I don't know of any who have done it because the law is so new, but as it matures and people get used to it, and as you will, and you'll find out how it works and if it works well or not, that's an option. Because it would certainly help the mitigation side of things if a VMT bank was created.
Thanks, Jim.
Any other questions or comments for our consultant or staff? Okay. If not, we can entertain a motion or further discussion on this topic.
Mr. Chair, could you check for any public comments on this item, please?
Okay, yeah, thank you. We'll go ahead and open up to the public for any comment, either in favor, against, or neutral towards this. I see one attendee on Zoom, but no hand up. And I don't see anybody else calling in. So that said, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission for discussion or motion. Okay, so let's see. Ryan, anything else to add on this, or do we want to go ahead and, we still need a motion to make the recommendation to the city council, correct?
That's correct. We're asking your commission to pick which map and we're recommending using that countywide one because it's the most flexible. And this slide shows the items that we would want to recommend to council. And before we go to council, we're going to do a little bit more work to wrap these into the environmental procedures for the city. So that's what would go before city council.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Yeah. I move that we recommend that the city council adopt the city's baseline maps and threshold of significance and include in the city's environmental procedures.
And that would be the countywide baseline,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
The countywide.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye. Thank you so much for that presentation. We'll go ahead and move on to other business. Item number 4, the oral reports from Planning Commission and staff. Do we have any oral reports or staff reports? Commissioner Seifert.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So our Donovan and Main Street projects have come along quite nicely. I drove by there the other day. Both of the gas stations are built. I think it was a Shell station. They came in and they weren't even asking us to do the Shell, and we said, hey, if you're going to be a Shell, do the Shell logo and all the signage, and the place really looks good. I noticed that the dialysis center is started across the street also, so that area is shaping up pretty nicely. I also noticed that the cell tower that we approved at the airport parking lot has been constructed. There's still a porta potty outside, so I'm not sure they're done because the fencing that we required isn't done yet. But the cell tower's done, and I'm guessing that they're finishing up on that project. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Actually, they also started the project right behind the Splash and Dash between the old GNS carpet, and they started on that about 3 days ago.
Didn't see that, thank you.
Yeah. Any other reports from the Planning Commission or staff?
This is staff, Ryan Hostetter again. Just to remind you all, we have a study session tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. And then our next hearing will be on the 19th of August.
Perfect.
Ryan, have you sent that invitation out yet for the study session?
I have not. I didn't want him to get confused,
Good,
so I'll
thank
do
you.
it first thing in the morning.
Thank you very much, thank you. That was my point.
That'll be a complete Zoom meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments or questions, we're adjourned, and we're adjourned at 9:42.
Thank
See you guys
you.
tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.